It's very enlightening in that regard. It tells us a lot about how they think about Ukraine and how they think about the future of any peace deal.
The White House trying to work out how to respond to the news that the editor of the Atlantic magazine was added to a group chat with members of Donald Trump's inner circle. Kezia, what to conclude from this? What's your first impression? Because on the one hand, it's pretty chaotic, and from a security point of view, it's pretty dangerous. The argument made by sort of pro-Trump people, who that guy we just heard was fairly pro-Trump when we spoke to him earlier, was this showed sensible people having frank exchanges of views in a way that's conducive to good government.
That's not what I'm taking from it, Greg. I struggle to think that many people would settle on that. I mean, it's absolutely astonishing, right? The casual nature of this, the fact that it's even discussed on a site like Signal, even if it is, encrypted to a degree that makes it safe and all the rest of it. Just the idea that you could have such senior people from the breadth of the Trump administration texting each other about matters as serious as this, in and of itself is astonishing. And that's before you get to the kind of casual nature of how they talk about Europe and the fact that they're going to find a way to levy the costs of securing the channel against Europe and make us pay because they're fed up always having our backs. I mean, it's jaw-dropping stuff. It wouldn't make a film script. It would lack the credibility for a film script, yet it's the reality of what we're faced with now.
And is that important, Kezia, do you think, for us to recognise that, we're about to get a statement from Russia and the US shortly, from Saudi Arabia, about the future of the ceasefire negotiations? And we probably should remember, and we heard Witkoff talking to Tucker Carlson earlier this week, they have a certain view of Europe, and that sort of view of Europe is not one of support.
It's very enlightening in that regard. It tells us a lot about how they think about Ukraine and how they think about the future of any peace deal in that regard. It also shows us the smallness of that thinking. So that is a legitimate view to hold, right? That Europe should be more responsible and take, a greater financial investment in its own security. But to front load that, to have that at the top of the agenda right now in the midst of the far greater issue of security is the one that frightens me the most.
Ed, do you think we have to sort of start listening to them? Because in almost any time we read what they say or we hear what they say the same thing about Britain and about Europe. And we say, it's a special relationship and Keir Starmer's going to be a bridge and America's going to come back and offer some sort of security to Ukraine. And virtually nothing that they say would suggest that to be true.
Yeah, that's right. And I think in that sense, the Signal texts are very useful because they do reveal the inner thinking. It shows that their scepticism about Europe, their hostility towards Europe, is not public posturing with warm words said in private. It's genuinely what they think. So in a sense, it gives you a very useful insight into their mindset. And it should remind European leaders that there is really no room for manoeuvre as far as negotiating with America about our own defence is concerned. And we know that there are, as there always is with the Trump administration, there's always a kernel of justification, if you like. And US presidents since John F. Kennedy have complained about Europe not doing enough to secure its own defence. And this is yet another signal, as it were, no pun intended, that we really do have to sort out our own defence. We can't rely on this administration, that's for sure. And it may be that we won't rely on future administrations as well. So it is just another addition to the wake-up call that has been broadcast loud and clear over the last few weeks.
Kezia, is this the future of political decision-making? Because we had this conversation. I remember talking to you about this, and Kate and I have spoken about it before as well. With the COVID files that came out, we saw Boris Johnson's government WhatsApping merrily. And it does feel that there used to be a formality about decision-making in government, civil servants taking minutes. There'd obviously be informal chats on the phone and there'd be chats in corridors. But that wasn't how business was done. Business was done with a starchy collar and a fountain pen next to you writing down everything that you say. And we've gone about as far away from that as possible. Is that a bad thing necessarily?
It's most definitely a bad thing. I think we want to believe that people who are taking decisions as serious as this, such as choosing to bomb another country, would do so sat round a table together in a considered fashion with all the relevant experts and advice at their disposal, that records of how that decision was taken were kept, not just for accountability in the moment, but for history's sake. So, of course, I understand, and I've been a part of it, in the past to a lesser degree, that you have political WhatsApp groups where views are exchanged, but it's not a place where decisions should be made, and it's certainly not a place where decisions related to defence and security should be made.
Ed, have you ever conducted business on messaging apps within government? I mean, were we ever told? Because when you were in government, there were still messaging apps. I think then you're not that old, are you? There was stuff like WhatsApp around then, wasn't there? Maybe there wasn't.
No, I am that old. I was such a catastrophic failure that I was kicked out of government in 2016 before WhatsApp became a thing. But I remember banging on quite a lot in the late 2010s about how WhatsApp had changed government and indeed politics, because it's not just obviously government ministers discussing things on WhatsApp, but the fact that you had groups of MPs collecting together on WhatsApp meant that people, we know that people can be franker on text than they would to your face. So people would post, very inflammatory statements about their colleagues, which were then duly leaked normally to the Sunday Times. And it kind of, in some ways, I think, kind of ramps up political tensions at this kind of instant response mechanism where people who are irritated in the morning by what they've heard on the radio, for example, post a message on WhatsApp which goes to all their colleagues and then ramps things up. I mean, there's a delicious irony about the Signal message being used, because the president of Signal, Meredith Whittaker, is a great advocate for security and privacy, and she sees Signal as being something as a counterweight towards government intrusion. But it is, I hear what Kezia says. I mean, I think the fact of the matter is that government ministers will now communicate on WhatsApp. It's a very convenient and simple way to do it. And the way round it, which is never going to be perfect, is to have some protocols in place to effectively have civil servants set up official WhatsApp groups, because we know, as you say, from the COVID inquiry, that these WhatsApps can be recovered. They are, in every respect, government records as much as the person in the starch collar with the quill pen. So there should be official WhatsApp groups. We should bring WhatsApp, as it were, in from the cold and say this is now a communication mechanism that ministers will use, but it just needs to be put on a sort of official footing, and records need to be kept of those WhatsApp exchanges, and ministers should be discouraged from having informal conversations on separate WhatsApp groups that aren't monitored by officials.
Kezia, I mean, the benefit for us to all of this is, of course, that we get a real insight into how some of these people genuinely think, and they clearly trust one another and this method of communication. They must use it all of the time, because there is a point in this chat where JD Vance, the vice president, says, team, I'm busy right now, but I think we're making a mistake. He goes on to talk about 3% of US trade runs through the Suez, 40% of European trade does. And he says there's a real risk that the public doesn't understand this or why it's necessary. And he goes on to suggest that maybe it might be an idea to delay the campaign for a month, work out the messaging and why it matters, including seeing where the economy is. I mean, he at that particular moment is not in agreement with the president.
No, he's not. And that's the first time that we've seen a split, so to speak, between the Vice President and the President. And that's significant in and of itself. Although they're denying that now and saying they're entirely in the same place. But just listening to you read that out, Kate, I mean, it sounds like a bunch of blokes organising who's going to book fives for a Sunday kickabout. I mean, the idea that is, a parallel way to do business, to organise defence and security just absolutely blows my mind. What's interesting about JD Vance's argument there is it's pretty smart, right? He's saying, I don't think the public are with me. We need to explain better why we're doing this, what the rationale for that is. So there is a logic and a reasoning to what he's arguing for. But that's the type of thing you would expect to be said or done or debated around a cabinet table, or in the corner of whatever part of government buildings these conversations are had. The idea that is the place for this discussion and that's where decisions are made by such senior people is absolutely astonishing.
And I think if this was in Britain, Ed, the Prime Minister would be in this debate. What I find interesting about America, the way the American kind of quasi-monarchical system works, is that ultimately when Trump says he didn't know about it, I can kind of believe he didn't know about it. He seems to sort of move between golf courses and press conferences and says what he thinks. But I wonder if this also reveals that there's a kind of the inner circle does an awful lot of the heavy lifting for Trump. Maybe that's obvious, but you'd expect the leader to be in this one normally, I'd have thought.
Well, not necessarily, nor would I necessarily expect the Prime Minister to be privy to these conversations.
Oh, really?
If we were planning an operation somewhere, the Defence Secretary might be taking the lead, and then when a conclusion was reached, that would be then signed off by the Prime Minister. So I can see why those discussions might have taken place without the President, although we have read the President doesn't do much in the morning anyway. But I also think what Kezia said about JD Vance's thinking was very interesting, because it does show, in some ways, thank goodness, an intelligent man thinking this through. And again, he's making a point which the Europeans need to address. If it's true that 3% of US trade goes through the Suez Canal and 40% of European trade goes through the Suez Canal, what is Europe's role in securing this important shipping lane? And the Americans, I regret to say it, may have a point in saying that the Europeans are not doing enough, both in terms of their own personal security, but also international security. So this is the kind of insight that is very, very important into how we think about our own defence going forward.
Yeah, that's what I find so fascinating about it. It's the insight into how deep these thought processes are ingrained. This is not a thing that they say in public to get more defence money. This is a really strongly held belief in a top team of people around President Trump.